Hello, I'm Mr. Gradulis, and this is my presentation all about the novels of Honors Freshman English by various authors. I'll begin with some information about my book's plot and characters before discussing the importance of the setting, connection between the author's background and the story, and then the story's interesting elements. I'll conclude with my thoughts on whether or not this novel should be part of the regular 9H curriculum. In the prologue of Romeo and Juliet, the reader learns the exposition of the story, including how the Capulet and Montague families are old rivals with a long-term feud between them, and how nothing but the death of their children will end their hatred for one another. The opening scene serves as the inciting incident. Two Capulet servants start a fight with two Montague servants in a town over a rude gesture. The fight escalates quickly as more family members and townspeople join in, causing the prince to arrive and break things up, promising death the next time the families fight. This scene establishes that normal life is dangerous and full of conflict. The turning point of the story occurs when Romeo, Montague's son, attends Capulet's feast uninvited in order to see his love interest, Rosaline, only to meet Juliet, Capulet's daughter, instead. The two talk briefly and experience love at first sight. Considering that they are from rival families, the big question becomes, will Romeo and Juliet defy the feud and live happily ever after together? Or, in other words, will their relationship work out, or will it fail? Antigone by Sophocles takes place in Thebes, Greece, prior to 441 BC, when the play was first performed, and draws on tales from Greek mythology. Thebes was an ancient walled city said to have 7 gates. In the play, this feature of the city impacts the story, because Antigone's brother, Polynices, unsuccessfully lays siege to Thebes of the 7 gates in order to regain control of the throne from his brother, Oedicles, with whom he was supposed to share power after his father Oedipus's death. The city's heavily fortified walls and limited access points causes Polynices' attack to fail, but not before he and Oedicles kill one another, leaving Polynices' body to rot outside the city's walls. The story of Antigone demonstrates that the polytheistic religion of the ancient Greeks, who worshipped multiple gods like Zeus, the head god and god of the weather, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. In the play, the chorus believes Antigone's family is being punished by Zeus because of her father's misdeeds and hubris. Specifically, they say Polynices' forces were defeated because Zeus blasted them from the walls with the frown of his thunder. They also blame Aphrodite for the conflict between King Creon and his son Haman, who is engaged to Antigone. Antigone defies Creon's law, and Haman takes her side in the conflict, partly because he loves her. Loyal to the king, the chorus blames Aphrodite for clouding Haman's good judgment. According to the rules of ancient Greek religion, a body must be buried with the proper rituals for the soul to be at peace in the underworld. Specifically, libations of wine must be poured on the body 3 times, and the body must be buried under the earth. In the play, Antigone defies Creon's law by sprinkling wine on Polynices' body 3 times and by covering it with dust. When caught, she shows no regrets, saying Creon's law was not God's proclamation, and that she should be praised for honoring the law of the gods. Charles Dickens was born February 7, 1812, in Portsmouth, England, and died June 9, 1870, near Chatham, England. Dickens' father had poor spending habits and was sent to debtor's prison. As a result, Charles had to leave school at a young age to go work in a shoe blackening factory, pasting labels on boxes. It was difficult work, so when Dickens' mother insisted he keep working there even after his father was released from prison, he resented her. These life experiences could have influenced Dickens to write about abandoned children who are either orphaned or neglected by their parents, since he felt neglected by his father and mistreated by his mother. Specifically, Lucy Manette is abandoned for nearly 17 years after her mother dies, and she thinks her father is also dead, but he is really in prison for 18 years. After 18 years of marriage and 10 children, Dickens became very unhappy in his marriage and wrote in letters that were later published that his wife Catherine suffered from a mental disorder that was worse when they were together, and partly why they had formally separated. In A Tale of Two Cities, Dr. Manette suffers from mental disorder after being in prison for 18 years. His daughter and friends take care of him whenever he has an episode, but his illness makes him difficult to handle at times. Thus, Dickens' experience with his wife could have inspired this characterization. Before becoming an author, Dickens gained first-hand experience with the British court system through his work as an office boy for an attorney and as a court reporter for the Common Courts and Parliament. As a result, the plots of many of his novels focus on law and politics. Specifically, in A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Darnay is put on trial in England as a traitor and is nearly convicted and sentenced to a barbaric death based on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of two unreliable witnesses, thereby showing Dickens' opinion of the British court system. The Odyssey is narrated by the author and is told from a third-person omniscient point of view. In the story, the narrator reveals the thoughts of Telemachus and Odysseus, as well as other characters. In this first quote from page 3, the narrator is talking about Telemachus, Odysseus' son, using the third-person pronoun he. The narration reveals the inner thoughts of Telemachus, narrating that he was sad at heart and at heart ashamed, both of which are feelings only a narrator inside the character's head would be able to know, as they are not observable. The second quote from pages 57 to 58 is about the protagonist Odysseus. Here, the narrator talks about Odysseus using third-person pronouns like he, and shows his internal monologue in which he is initially uncertain about how best to approach Nausicaa, but eventually makes up his mind to talk to her from a distance. Only a narrator with the ability to see Odysseus' inner thoughts would know this information, since it is not observable. The third-person omniscient point of view allows the reader to see how different characters are handling Odysseus' long absence from home. The reader sees Telemachus' inner feelings and how desperately he yearns to see his father, or even learn more about him. The reader also sees Odysseus' inner struggle to determine the best way to ask for help, so that he can get home to his wife and son. The major conflicts of the book center around Odysseus' 20-year journey home and the chaos left in his wake as suitors try to court his wife. Being able to see the inner thoughts and feelings of multiple characters creates dramatic irony for the reader, who knows Odysseus is still alive when most characters think him dead, and who knows what troubles await Odysseus at home when Odysseus has no idea. This dramatic irony creates suspense for the reader, and keeps him or her reading as he or she wonders if Odysseus will ever get home and resolve these conflicts. In this quote from chapter 6, Orwell uses a simile to emphasize to the reader how difficult the animals' lives are under Napoleon's rule. After Napoleon uses his dogs to run his co-leader Snowball off the farm, Napoleon tells the animals that they will build the windmill Snowball designed. However, because the pigs are more educated than the other animals, they do not do any physical labor on the farm. Thus, when Orwell says, "That year the animals worked like slaves," he is comparing the other animals to slaves working for a master, or in this case, the pigs. This simile emphasizes Napoleon's power and brutality, since the animals are forced to work extremely hard under his leadership. It also emphasizes the animals' ignorance in blindly following Napoleon and the other pigs when there is such obvious inequality between them. The animals of Manor Farm thought they would be able to share power equally after rebelling against tyrannical Mr. Jones, but now the pigs have become tyrannical. Thus, Orwell seems to use this moment to teach the reader that although rebellion is justified when a lack of equality exists, it is no longer justified if the rebelling person becomes just like their former oppressor. Throughout A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens discusses the inequality between the rich and the poor in France. In Book 2, he introduces the character of Monseigneur the Marquis, an aristocrat who attends another aristocrat's party in Paris, before driving home to his palatial chateau in the countryside. The Marquis becomes an important character in the story because he is Charles Darnay's uncle, and when the revolutionaries kill the Marquis, he leaves the family fortune to Darnay, which later causes major conflicts in the book. In this passage from Book 2, Chapter 7, Dickens demonstrates a critical tone toward the Marquis. Dickens includes details that suggest that the Marquis is a sadist, since he enjoys watching poor French commoners almost get run over by his carriage as it recklessly races through the narrow streets. Later, Dickens' personification of the city as both deaf and mute emphasizes that despite the fact that this was a time period in which no one noticed or commented on the rich people's terrible treatment of the poor, the Marquis' driving is so harmful that people actually dare to complain about him being a menace to society. Finally, Dickens expresses his critical tone toward the Marquis through the negatively connotative words he uses to describe the Marquis, saying his driving is hard and endangered and even maimed the poor in a way that is truly barbarous. Overall, Dickens' characterization of the Marquis as a sadistic, awful, and barbaric man suggests that he is critical of him. Antigone by Greek writer Sophocles should be included in the honors freshman English curriculum because it meets all of the criteria for inclusion. First, the play depicts a non-American setting that helps students build valuable schema on ancient Greek culture. It takes place in Thebes, Greece, in ancient times, and has many allusions to the aspects of Greek culture and the origins of theater that students are unlikely to know about already. Thus, reading this play would expand students' schema on Greek culture and make it a book worth including. The play is also challenging and requires thoughtful study. With the inclusion of well-developed characters, including character archetypes such as the tragic hero, and a variety of conflicts, the reader is tasked with analyzing a complex plot. The heavy use of irony also provides an opportunity for analysis of author's craft. All of this would challenge students' reading and literary analysis skills, making it a text worthy of inclusion in the curriculum. Finally, the play should be included in the curriculum because it is appropriate for honors ninth graders. The play's only questionable content is a few passing references to violence that is not shown graphically, and a few references to incest and sex that a 14-year-old can handle. Because this play is mainly dialogue, it is easy to understand. However, all the allusions and the cryptic, figurative language of the chorus increases its difficulty at times, making the book on par with books like The Odyssey or Animal Farm. Ultimately, the book meets all three criteria for inclusion and should be included in the honors freshman English curriculum. Thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to hearing all of the other speeches about all of the other novels done for the Independent Novel Project.